All right, we're back another week. Rush Hour Pod. I'm TW. This is Justin. You know the routine. We're talking tech from non-technical people here. First up, what do we got? We got Tesla.
Yeah, so Tesla news. Tesla's had a rough year up until recently. They were
Right.
down nearly like 30%. People were concerned. People talk about kind of the Magnificent Seven, and Tesla was starting to get removed, from that whole group. But on Friday, like the stock has pretty much eliminated its losses for the year and marked like a 27% gain for that week, which is pretty like insane gain. But a lot of it is based off of better than expected second quarter deliveries. Um, and not that it blew it out of the water, but it was better than the analysts expected. And so that's resulted in kind of the stock bouncing back. They're going to release their second quarter financial results on July 23rd. And I think gross margins is going to be a primary focus based off of, where they've been in the past. And the other thing that's interesting is Cybertruck sales. So for Cybertruck launched in 2023, and I think it was the best-selling fully electric pickup in the U.S. in the second quarter. Right behind that, Ford's F-150. And so, there's been a bit of a turn in the Tesla narrative in terms of the
Yeah.
results. I think there are some higher price targets, still lag behind the Nasdaq and S&P, which are up like 20%. Tesla's now only up 1%, but it seems like the momentum is coming back. So I think the next big thing is just how well Elon can execute FSD, and we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah. I mean, I took part in it. We talked about in the past. We bought another Tesla Model Y when they slashed the prices one more time, and met some neighbors that bought a Cybertruck, and had another friend of ours, Tong, whose Cybertruck waitlist came through. So like it seems like they're
Oh,
moving
sick.
pretty quickly through, um, pretty quickly through that waitlist. So should be interesting. I heard somewhere that was they're up to like 1,300 a week now of deliveries. So that's a lot. That's a lot of trucks coming out of there. It'll be exciting to see that, getting all those out, and then um, robo taxi service coming, and all the other incredible things we've talked about. It's exciting times ahead for
Yeah.
Tesla.
Have you driven in the Cybertruck?
I have not driven it, but I've sat in it. It's surprisingly roomy. It's
Okay.
really like, I mean, it's way bigger than I expected. Like the back seat is it's a full four seats. You can probably fit five in there pretty easily. Um, it, I hear the whatever steering that they've done is very sensitive when you're going low speeds. So you can literally U-turn with the simple, twist of the arm.
Hmm.
So yeah, it seems like the people that own them love them. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
We'll see how we'll see what happens when they're everywhere. I'm just curious because right now they're still kind of novel, and like getting one seems really special. I'm
Yep.
curious what happens when like the Y when those things are when that's the number one truck out and about and everyone's got them. I'm curious what happens, um, to the look and the feel, or maybe the brand and the feeling of the Tesla Cybertruck.
I I'm not sure how I feel about the aesthetics of the truck. I mean, I think it's definitely very unique. It's definitely eye
Yes.
catching, right? You're on the highway and you're going to notice them. There's absolutely no way you're not going to notice the truck, which I think is kind of cool. Maybe it's a little futuristic for my personal taste in terms of buying one,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
they do look pretty interesting.
It's like a Lego car. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
The one thing though that the couple of people that I talked to said they did have to wrap them because the fingerprints were getting out of control. So they
Uh,
both wrapped the cars in another color, to sort of offset the fingerprints and washing and all of that. That was probably the biggest complaint that I heard. Nobody talked about the recall with the gas pedal, I guess, getting stuck, but
yeah,
otherwise, people seem very happy with their Cybertrucks, which I think is a
yeah.
good sign.
I'm really I think they're supposed to have like a Cybertruck or sorry, a Robo Taxi day in in August,
Interesting.
right?
I haven't heard.
Yeah, but I think it's not supposed to launch until like 2027. But there's supposed to be maybe some announcement in August. So
Oh,
that
nice.
could be
Okay.
kind of interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, full. I mean, I was in the city yesterday, and I did I did see a bunch of the the Waymo robo taxis driving around, which is really cool.
yeah. Have you been in one of the Waymos?
I've not been in one. I
Yeah.
wouldn't be against it, but
No.
I've seen like the TikToks where they go down the wrong side of the road and stuff like that. But for the most
Mm,
part, I mean, the two or three that I saw last night, they seemed fine.
yeah.
Just driving like any other car in traffic.
Yeah, I would check it out. I the funniest thing is when I've been in like more touristy areas in SF and seeing people's reaction to it. They're just like, what is that? You know, for us, it's like, oh, they're trying out, experimenting something new. Other people are like, this place is just, I can't even
Yeah,
deal with
what
it.
is
You
going
got
on?
people doing meth over here. You got, autonomous vehicles. Like, what is
Yeah,
happening in this place?
we're in the future.
Yeah.
It does. I mean, my daughter thought it was just the Google car with the Google Maps car because it has all the
Uh,
sensors and stuff around it, and it kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
looks like that. So she was like, "Oh, isn't that the Google Maps car?" I'm like, "No, that's the Waymo service." So yeah, I think it doesn't stick out that much,
Hmm.
but yeah, I'm curious as to what the ride is like inside. I haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
Maybe next time.
Yeah, we'll have to check it out and do one of our
Yeah,
episodes on that
yeah,
experience.
agreed.
Other news, I know Nike had some news recently, and you want to talk about that. So what's going on there?
So Nike had their earnings. They fell short, of sales, and the stock tanked 20% in one day. So I think it's at 73 now, and a lot of people are curious as to what's happening with Nike. We talked about in the past has innovation been stunted by the pandemic and working from home, as their CEO stated, and it looks like it's hurting their bottom line. They're feeling the effects of it, and lots of people are sort of like jumping ship and selling Nike because they're concerned. And I even saw Warren Buffett talk about why he doesn't invest in Nike, and he just said there's so many factors in Nike that I don't
Mm,
understand. I'm not saying it's a bad business, but I just don't understand the moat that they've created with their products. So I've never invested. In which,
mm,
we've talked about in the past. It is
yeah,
sort of this nebulous thing of like brand and culture that is hard to pinpoint if you're not in it. If you don't know, it's hard. It's hard to
yeah.
tell. Like, hey, what's a good shoe? What's not? What's hype? What's not? As they say, hype moves mysteriously, and like if you're an investor, that's not a signal for you to go and purchase it.
No, for sure. I mean, I'm curious. Well, one, like, wasn't the whole kind of the climb of Nike, especially versus their competitors like Converse's, et cetera, in the past, based off of alignment with these, with these superstars, right? Who
Yep.
became, many ways the face of the brand. And when you create a strategy that's based off of that, then you got to kind of stay at the top in terms of, having the most, famous and popular people within that category continue to champion the brand. I think the challenge is there's a lot more. Well, I think there are a lot more kind of heralded, you know, creators or popular figures who are wearing all types of shoes. So it's not like one necessarily has a
Yes.
stranglehold and everything. And then to the earlier point, not like necessarily the technology has changed so much that they've reinvented kind of the shoe. So when you have those two factors, imagine that's creating a lot of pressure
Yeah.
for the
And
company.
and I think right, you can't pinpoint just one thing at the moment, which I think is another reason why so many people are like, you know what, I'm out because I don't really understand it. There is right. There's no Michael Jordan in the league now that like dominating sport. There's no Tiger Woods left. Like it's hard to pinpoint who's
Mm-hmm.
the one person now that can carry a brand like Nike. And maybe that's too much to ask for one person at this point. That it has to
Mm-hmm.
be collectively, like as you said, a culture that creates that sort of brand, and they're struggling there. Yeezy and Kanye left. Obviously, he left on a somewhat sour note with Adidas, and Travis Scott, has been keeping them up, but like it's not enough. He's also created his own sneaker silhouettes, and they're launching, but the volume isn't there to see it in the numbers. So I think
Yeah.
that this is a really important time for Nike because they've created this incredible like hype where they've done these limited supply drops, and then they've collaborated with people, and they've used like nostalgia to really sell things. And now they've kind of ramped up volume. People like saturated the market. People aren't buying.
Mm-hmm.
People. It's the opposite of effect of what they did in the past, which is they've increased supply and now demand has dwindled because there was so much of this balance that they were dealing with. So we'll see
Yep.
what's next. I think it's very critical for them to kind of figure out. It might be like similar to what Adidas did. They created the Ultra Boost. They had such a foothold in the marketplace, and then
Mm-hmm.
they oversaturated it. Kanye left, and now they're kind of hustling to figure out what's next for them. And I think you're right. A lot of small time innovate or influencers are just down to wear New Balance and Asics and Crocs and all kinds of things. So it's not like back in the day where it's Jordan, Nike, or bust. There's just a
Right.
lot more options today that are acceptable, right?
Totally. And I feel like what Nike did have and still has is kind of LeBron,
Yep.
and how much attention that he carries, not only on the basketball court, but all the philanthropy and everything else he does. He was an incredible ambassador, but he's on his way out. You have his son Bronny coming in. I think that will help to a certain extent if they can do content together and create the whole father son narrative. That's really interesting. But that's a big bet. I'm really
Do you,
curious to see. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, do you think social media giving access or such access to, you know, basically influencers like a LeBron,
Mm-hmm.
Bronny, KD, Curry, like all of these people are much more accessible than they used to be, than the Jordan and the Tiger Woods and the Joe Montanas that used to be. Is it possible that is making their sort of mythical narrative, it's kind of breaking that wall down where people seem are much more humanized and reachable, and people aren't idolizing their sort of superstars because they're constantly being checked by social media with either memes or jokes or the counterculture, so that no one kind of floats above like a Jordan or a Tiger. It seems to me, it seems that way, but I don't know. What is
Mm.
your take?
That's a really interesting point. I feel like I more think the opposite. I think that like because people have become so relatable that it's been even more helpful to the brand. I'll take like a non Nike example. You think of like a Mr. Beast, right? Who's creating content and people see him all the time, et cetera. He's able to create these $1 billion brands off of people's kind of emotional connection with him and his content and what he's built. So I don't know if I would necessarily say it's because of the allure. I think it's more because there are so many with the advent of social media and all these other platforms. There's just so many more places where people can have touch points with other like high caliber athletes and influencers, et cetera. And it's not just like one
Right.
name brand that controls an entire industry. So what happens there is it's just more of the pie is getting eaten off by these other brands. And that's not to say that Nike isn't still the top, but relative to where their earnings would be if they had a monopoly, that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I'm a big sneakerhead. And when I was at Disneyland over the Fourth, when I'm sitting just people watching, that's one of the things I kind of
Uh-huh.
take note of is like, what are people wearing? Like everyday people wearing, not necessarily like
Yep.
sneakerheads and all these things. Like, and just watching it. No, it used to be like mostly Nike. Like most
Right.
people would just have default Nikes. Dads would do the Monarchs. You know, kids would do some form of Nikes, and that moms would wear like a running shoe of some kind. But now
Yep.
I'm seeing Hoka, and I'm seeing like all kinds of a lot of New Balance. I'm seeing Solomon. I'm seeing Ace. I'm seeing a lot more brands. Still a lot of Nike. Don't get me wrong, but
Uh-huh.
like now, I definitely notice a sort of shift in the everyday consumer being open to other brands because I always assume back in the day you have Nike and you have Jordan that sets the tone. Then the average person goes to the outlet and just buys a pair of Nikes, right? Like you don't think about it, and that seems to have changed. Which it could, I don't know if that's good or bad, but I think it's pretty interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, I think that example that you did with like Hoka in particular, kind of like the
Yeah,
comfort sneakers, like you're a crazy sneakerhead. I'm more enthusiast who dabble. So when I think about like the brands, when I think about why I like Nike, yeah, it was cool, but it's also super comfortable. Like Nike sneakers are really really comfortable. But now you have
right,
ones that are of comparative comfortability or
right,
even more in some
right.
cases, and like I sneakers, I think. Tell me this. Tell me if I had this right. I don't know if this is right. You're more of like a student of history on this, but I feel like there was some counterculture aspect of sneakers that existed before, and that Nike helped to kind of bring into the fray that made sneakers kind of like a cool, like just wearing sneakers just at all
Yes,
be kind of cool
yes,
thing, and Nike being the mechanism to do that. Now sneakers are more of a commodity, and so because they're more of a commodity, I think there's a larger percentage of people who are just looking for like comfort. For example,
yes,
if you think about the
yes.
long tail, and some of the other brands are also I think they do a good job with aesthetics, things like that. I think Hoka generally does a good job with that, but it just creates another layer of pressure for that business without true fundamental like innovation, which again you have a
Right.
better sense of. But me as kind of like a hobbyist and novice in this space, I haven't really necessarily seen something come out from Nike where I'm like blown away.
No, I think you're right. I think they've relied a lot on that brand and that mystique that they had in the past. They set the like you said, they set the tone to make sneakers an everyday thing. Whereas in the past, you have your work shoes, and you'd have your weekend shoes, and they might be sneakers, and they may not. And now all of those things are kind of blended together. People wear Nikes to work. Things are casual. It's much more acceptable, and then it kind of gets you into sneakers. You're like, all right, these feel great. What else is out there now that I can
Yeah.
wear sneakers to work? What else can I find? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that definitely, Nike kind of opened the door and created the space, and now lots of people are playing in it, um, and innovating in it as well. And it kind of is like what Apple did, honestly, with the phones, and now you get Samsung and Pixel and all these things that are coming out that are frankly more innovative than Apple. But Apple did it first and kind of got their feet in there, um, and kind of made it accessible to everybody. And now people are like, all right, what else is out there? What are the other features I could get from a pair of shoes or a pair of sneakers? So
Totally.
it's yeah, it's interesting. I don't know where we go from here, but it's definitely interesting.
In terms of like where we go from here with Nike in particular, and like what happens with the stock and with the business, and maybe I'm over hyping this, but I'm very curious to see what the impact of the Olympics is on the brand
Yes.
in terms of them showing, hey, we're the main player in the space, and
Right.
all these other brands that have come in, like you've been able to encroach a bit, but this is Nike, and this is what we're about, and these are the athletes
Yep.
that we have, and this is the innovation that we're driving. So, do you have any sense of what's going there, if anything, or if that's something that you're interested in and curious about as well?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm curious how the Olympics is going to go, and we talked about in the past, like Caitlin Clark as well, and sort of the WNBA and what happens with them. So many eyeballs are on that sport, and for them to sign Caitlin, and to see what's going to happen there, it's interesting. I think Bronny James is one thing, but like Caitlin brought a lot of new eyeballs into the sport of basketball, and footwear as well. Like the Sabrina um, Ionescu shoe does really well. I think her second one just released. Lots of people like it. You see a lot of men wearing it as well. So I think those are probably the
That's
two
dope.
areas that I'm most curious about. Yeah, a lot more interest in sort of like other sports, outside of the usual NBA, NFL, at least in America.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's a good segue into, we're talking about influencers and creator economy and the impact that it has on brands and obviously entire businesses in the case of Nike in terms of like revenues. But there was a article that I shared out on LinkedIn that I think you may have seen, or I may have sent it to you directly. We talk about some trends in Gen Z, and one of the most recent reports that came out highlighted that a significant percentage of Gen Z identifies as content creators. So apparently 65% now consider themselves creators, up from 25%, up 25% from the prior year. And also that fandoms play a really big role in video viewership, particularly on YouTube, with 89% of Gen Z describing themselves as fans or of someone or something. And so I think that's very, you and I have been in this space for a long time. I think if someone said, "Hey, the job that most people want to be within, Gen Z is a YouTuber," right? Like that would have made sense to us. But the fact that if you just kind of take even the brand of YouTube out of it, the fact that most people consider themselves, creators in some form is very fascinating within the
It
context of how
is.
people are, positioning themselves and then what their careers could be. Because in one way, it really speaks to the impact of creator economy and these brands that these individuals that have been able to kind of create these brands that have changed what it means to be a celebrity or someone who's important, changed what it means to have an impact on a platform. But in another way, and I'm curious about how you feel about this second point, if it makes sense with you, which is coming out of like the '08 financial situation, and then currently now in terms of people's kind of inability to get jobs, or you're not necessarily being able to
Yes.
have a corporate job or get laid off, et cetera, a change in the mind of how people are thinking about just like being able to make an income and monetizing, and not necessarily being able
Right.
to rely on some type of corporate job as another part of that trend that's kind of pushing people more towards
Right.
an entrepreneurial path.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, right? I think when people, I mean, self-identifying is the key word. I feel like with content creator, because they're probably like, "Hey, I have a job, but I don't identify with that as my main passion or purpose." Where they may like creating content, like you could see someone doing a little podcast like as well. It doesn't get a lot of views, but this is what I care about, so I'm going to call myself a content creator, even
Uh-huh.
though my in my daily life I'm a banker or a whatever, whatever you may be, you still think I'm a content creator. That it kind of makes sense. Like when I think about it like that, um, that many people identify like, hey, I make a lot of TikTok or Instagram or Reels or whatever. That's what I really love. So I'm going to call myself a content creator,
Uh-huh.
even if it is just for their friends and family.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I feel like that kind of leads into, all right. So, if that's the trend, if that's where kind of the generation, that's starting to come into the workforce and is going to have more an impact on kind of the economy is leaning, what type of businesses or services are going to do well? Do you have any thoughts around maybe the type, like if you okay, so you have that new stat and you had to do something entrepreneurial, or you were investing in a company or whatever based off of that knowledge, how much you think about that?
I mean, me and you talk about crazy ideas in terms of business. And one of them is actually, how do you monetize or help all of these quote unquote content creators and
Mm-hmm.
support them with, you know people don't want to do the hard work, right? Like that's the thing. Everybody's making all of the things easier so that you can focus on what you love to do, which is
Mm-hmm.
amazing. But there's always going to be hard work. There's always going to be stuff that you don't want to do. So
Yeah.
I would probably think about how can I monetize for them on behalf of them, that piece, right? If there's
Yeah.
something that takes elbow grease, how can I do that, do it really well, and do it for people? That's probably how I would tackle it and say, hey, I want to start a business where I'm helping content creators market or edit or do whatever it is that is a pain. You talk to a few of them and be like, hey, what is the hard, whatever the hard thing is that they hate doing, and take that off their plate. And then
Totally.
can you scale that up? Like that's probably
Yeah.
where I would go in terms of like thinking about how to support them. But it seems like an obvious thing, which would be so many content creators need probably growth, right? They all are trying to get more eyeballs and more trying to get more content, and helping them with that would seem like the easiest path uh,
Yeah,
to to help them grow.
that's interesting. I know, like, there's this whole trend of kind of the whole like newsletter subs getting a bad rap
Yep.
now, and that kind of being on the decline. But I would imagine that some type of model like that, where you
Yeah.
could subscribe to get kind of insights on how to become a creator, not only from a growth perspective, but then also in terms of what kind of camera should I
Yeah.
have, or how do I think about topics? How do I think about creation of thumbnails, things like that, that just provide kind of a constant drip
Yeah.
of
Mr.
information.
I think
Yeah.
I listened to Mr. Beast talk about how when he got started, what really helped him was every day, every they would get together, either beginning or end of the day, with another couple of content creators, and they would literally just talk shop and just like, this is what I did today, this is how I got better, try this, try that, and they did that every single day,
Mm.
and they just got incrementally better and better. But he said that really helped him because it's like I got twice as fast because I had somebody else that was doing something similar, and when he learned something, I learned something, so we're both out there learning and then sharing it. um, so there may be, there's definitely something there, right? Like
Mm.
a lot of these content creators are out there in their own world trying to figure this out. When it all maybe if they when it got some advice, they could move a lot quicker.
Yeah. I think, that makes total sense to me. I think something, if I'm watching this now and I'm like, hey, well, I am interested in becoming a creator, and, what are the steps to take? Not necessarily that, me or you have ascended any crazy heights, but we think about entrepreneurship and startups, and kind of a land that we have been in where you're doing 0 to 1. A lot of times when you have limited resources, you're looking for just access to free content and tools. And the thing is, for a lot of these creators, what I would do is I would literally just go on YouTube and do a bunch of searches and watch 10, 20, 30 hours of content on how people started. And I think there's so much
Yeah.
information that you can even get, from that, and free resources. That would be super helpful.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about discovery of content
Mm-hmm.
and how TikTok obviously has flipped it on its head, and like I've noticed search isn't as popular as it used to be. I'm curious if YouTube is going to have a way to kind of bundle all these things together to make it
Mm.
easier. If you're like, I don't know, a signal that you want to be a content creator, and then they uh, pump in the content to help you out. I don't know. I'm just thinking in terms of like going down the rabbit hole. If YouTube or some, it doesn't have to be YouTube, but something like helps you get down that rabbit hole, um, that would be interesting, right? Like if they, I don't know how it would do it, but something like, hey, it watches your content and says, hey, you know what, you could use a new microphone. Here's some microphone videos. Here's some new
Yeah.
um, editing software. Here's some new something like that that automatically already identifies kind of what some weaknesses in your content, and then just pumps you the right. I don't know. That's kind of where my head goes.
I like that. I mean, I'm sure that'd be really. I mean, as we're thinking about that, right? I think it'd be cool if you created like a YouTube video, and you're trying to get better, and you can use some type of like chat type of interface to say, hey, what could I have done to improve this, and it like goes to the specific part, and so, well, you could have slowed down here. You were talking too fast, or this topic transition didn't make sense, or
Right.
your your camera quality or your microphone wasn't working, and here are a list of things you could buy. That'd be really cool. I feel like that's probably where all content is kind of going in terms of the
Yeah.
recommendation piece, just making that more robust. But particularly for creators, yeah, that would be very, I think that'd be like a huge value add to
Right.
creators.
Because like who you trust to do this is a big part of it. Because you're like,
Totally.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like being a part of a community, like you got to care about your community and trust them for you to take advice. If it's just random, you're not going to really care.
Yeah.
Like obviously Mr. Beast being a unique one of one with all this stuff, but like not everyone's Mr. Beast. You can't ping Mr. Beast on everything, so it's definitely interesting.
Exactly. I had one more topic maybe we could chat about quickly
Yeah.
that you may have seen. So there's a new there was an app that I think was invite only for a while, but I think now it just launched publicly. It launched publicly maybe last Wednesday. An app called No Place, which is basically kind of like a reboot on MySpace. You can connect with friends, people with shared interests, customizable, really colorful profile. Profiles include, a top 10 friends section, which is similar to MySpace's top
Love it.
eight, and it emphasizes connecting with friends and discovering what others have shared in terms of their interests, exposing a place for real-time updates as opposed to highlights of past events. So very much leaning into the kind of early millennial nostalgia of
Yeah.
some of those platforms that I know I spent a fair amount of time on. And so I'm curious what you think what you think about these kind of nostalgia type of throwback social platforms, if it will work, or what skepticisms you have about this model, or what gets you excited about it.
No, I think it's a great idea. People talk about MySpace all the time. Like, remember when it was MySpace, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone always felt like they were on to something, and it just kind of got eaten up by Facebook. So I love the idea of another stab at MySpace or Friendster or something like that. Because they had some. You talked about it off air, but like discovery of music and content and things like that. I feel like MySpace was a much better um, avenue for that, and maybe there's some way that this app could do that to connect you. Because truthfully, Facebook is not great at discovery of new friends and new things. It's
Yeah,
more you got to know what you kind of have to go and hunt for it and get linked to it. That versus you know like a TikTok set and forget, like just log in, scroll up, and all this new content finds you. Um, so I'm all for it. I think it's needed, honestly. What
yeah.
about you?
I'm I'm going to take a bit of a contrarian perspective on it, but I'll couch it with this, which is it is very difficult to launch anything from 0 to 1 and get enough viral
Yeah,
traction or any traction to get to the top of the app store. Like, even if you got all the money in the world, everything else, it is incredibly difficult. So any company that can kind of break out and do that, in a novel way, or just figure out how to hack their way into the top charts, I tip my hat to them, because I know how incredibly that difficult that is for working at early stage companies, starting my own, everything else, working in growth, stuff that we both know. That being said, and having come from a company recently where we were trying to do a bunch of projects in the social consumer space, and maybe some people would say, well, just because you weren't able to figure out doesn't necessarily mean this model will work, and that's a fair point. That's well taken. But I think it's more of a trend, and we may have talked about this in prior episodes, where people are trying to kind of move away from social platforms generally, or at least not leverage them in the way that people did in the past. I mean, I talk to Gen Z folks now who like put a limit on some of the apps that they're trying to do. They're trying to get off the phone. They're trying to do
yeah,
more, in-person experiences. You're seeing the decline of like dating apps is maybe a harbinger for where things are going, where people are like, I don't want to spend my time on these platforms. I want to go and meet people in real life. And so I think that the nostalgia piece is really interesting. Will it be a breakout success next Be Real, which you can say that's even kind of suspect on whether that was necessarily successful or not. I am just, not super bullish on social consumer right now without like an entirely new model being created, because
yeah,
none of the other ones have really had staying power. And I think it's because of, this trend towards more, in-person experiences. So I think these platforms will still exist, but I think it needs to bring that, in-person, online, offline piece in an elegant way a bit more
yeah,
for it to have true staying power.
yeah. 100%. I mean, it's going to be really hard. We've talked about it to actually do it. I'm not sure what it's going to take, honestly. But I'm all for it. I'm excited to see it and try it. But yeah, like that cold start in algorithm combination is very tricky. But let's see. Fingers crossed.
Yeah,
Something new will come along. This is no question.
I think
It
so.
will happen.
I think
Yeah,
so.
it'll
Yeah.
have to.
I'm excited. So one of y'all out there may have that next idea, and we
Yeah,
definitely willing to check it out. And maybe what we could do, it'd be kind of cool is if people did have like app ideas and stuff like that. If we had some way for people to send it in, and then we
yeah,
just
bet.
give our opinion on whether or not we
Yeah,
think it's viable, that could be kind of
yeah.
cool.
We should do an episode on what are some ideas and talk through them. That'd be fun. All right, till next week.
Till next week, sir. And make
Yes, sir.
sure like and subscribe. It helps us out. Tag your friends, and let us know in the comments if there are any other topics you want us to hit.
Till next week.
Till next week. Later.
Peace.
Peace.